You are in the middle of something completely ordinary, making coffee, folding laundry, walking from one room to the next, and then you hear yourself out loud, having a full conversation with no one. Maybe you are narrating what you are doing. Maybe you are working through a problem. Maybe you are replaying something that happened 3 days ago and finally saying the thing you wished you had said. And for a split second you think, is this normal? Should I be concerned? And then you carry on, because honestly, it felt completely natural. But someone walked in once, and the look on their face made you feel like you had just been caught doing something strange. They laughed, or they raised an eyebrow, or they said nothing, which somehow felt worse. And without anyone saying a single word directly, you absorbed the message. This is weird. This is something to hide. Here is what nobody told you. What you do when you are alone in that quiet private room of yours is not a quirk. It is not a warning sign. It is actually one of the clearest windows into how your mind works, and psychology has spent decades trying to understand it. Here is the first thing science found. Psychologist Gary Lupyan at the University of Wisconsin ran a series of experiments where he asked participants to search for objects, a fork, a key, a common item, among a set of random photographs. One group searched in silence. The other group said the name of the object out loud as they searched. The group that talked to themselves found the objects significantly faster. Lupyan concluded that verbalizing activates a mental representation of what you are looking for, keeping it sharper and more accessible in your working memory. In other words, your brain does not just hear words, it uses them as a tool for thinking more clearly. And here is the part that changes everything. For some people, this becomes a way of life, a default mode. And those people, research suggests, are operating with a specific kind of cognitive sophistication that most people never develop. That is the first trait. Your mind processes out loud, and it always has. Psychologist Kross at the University of Michigan discovered something that reframes everything about why you talk to yourself. He found that people who narrate their own experience in the third person, saying your own name, stepping slightly outside yourself to observe your own situation, showed dramatically reduced emotional reactivity when facing stress. Their brain scans showed less activation in the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fear and panic. They were not suppressing emotion, they were regulating it. Naturally, without medication, without therapy in the moment, without anyone helping them. Just through the act of speaking to themselves with a little psychological distance. That is the second trait. You are not talking to yourself because you cannot handle your emotions. You are talking to yourself because your brain found a way to handle them better than most people ever will. But why you? Why does this come naturally to you and not to everyone? The answer goes back further than you might expect. Lev Vygotsky, one of the most influential developmental psychologists of the 20th century, studied children and discovered something he called private speech, the habit young children have of narrating their own actions out loud as they play, as they problem solve, as they figure out the world. Most children stop this around age 7 as language goes underground and becomes inner thought. But some children, particularly those who spent more time alone, those who were more self-reliant, those who learned early to be their own company, they kept a version of this going. And the children who maintained private speech the longest showed stronger self-regulation, higher creativity, and more advanced problem-solving skills than those who stopped earliest. You were probably that child, the one who talked through things alone, the one whose mind was busy even when the room was quiet, the one who never needed someone else in the room to feel like the conversation was worth having. That is the third trait. You are deeply self-reliant by nature, not because life forced you to be, but because your mind was always your most natural home. Here is the honest question, and I want you to sit with it genuinely. When you talk to yourself, what are you saying? Because there is a difference between using self-talk as a tool and using it as a trap. If you are working through problems, building plans, processing experiences, coaching yourself through something hard, that is the fourth trait coming to life. You are your own most trusted advisor. But if your self-talk is mostly a replay of everything that went wrong, a rehearsal of every fear, a courtroom where you are always on trial, that is something worth noticing. Not because something is wrong with you, but because the same voice that can protect you can also imprison you. The question is not whether you talk to yourself. It is whether the conversation is kind. The question is only whether you are advising yourself toward clarity or keeping yourself stuck in circles. Talking to yourself is not the absence of someone to talk to. It is the presence of a mind that never stops thinking, never stops working, never stops trying to understand. You are never talking to nothing. You are always talking to the most important person in the room. If this explains something about yourself you have always known but never had words for, leave a comment below. I read every single one. Keep talking to yourself. It means you are listening.